On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Loren Boyce. She's the VP of Talent Acquisition at M13. We're going to be talking about being better storytellers. And I think this actually is an episode that fits if you're a founder, if you're a hiring manager, if you're in talent acquisition. We're going to cover different aspects of the storytelling within recruiting. And I think it all starts off right at the beginning when you start thinking about the job, from actually positioning it to candidates, hiring managers and what they're pitching, and founders. Sometimes they don't position these roles correctly. And I love this topic. When Loren mentioned it, I thought it was a great one. So Loren, super excited to have you on to cover this one.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Tell us all what M13 does before we dive into the podcast episode.
Okay. So M13 is an early stage VC fund. We invest in companies that are building in the space of infrastructure, software infrastructure, but looking at the future of work, the future of money, the future of commerce, and the future of health. And we also are looking at, how AI and Web3 really thread through all of those areas. So we do that, and we're based in Santa Monica, California, and in New York.
Awesome. All right. Well, some definite exciting areas that you guys are dealing with. And I know you guys obviously deal with a lot of founders and a lot of jobs that pop up. And, when you mentioned storytelling within the space, I was like, oh, this resonates with me. This is my whole reason for being in terms of what I love about the talent space. And you said something really interesting, because being a better storyteller about the position you have and understanding who you're trying to hire, you mentioned that storytelling begins right on the outset of when you start first thinking about a job, right? Maybe start us at the top level and tell us what that means to you.
Yeah, I say that because sometimes you need to take other people on a journey with you when you want to hire someone new at a company, especially at an early stage startup. So it starts with, what do we need? Why is this a need? Who might be the person that could do this job and fill a very impactful role at this moment in time at our company? So having a story around that unites people. It gets people on the same page. And I'm all about alignment. And I think if you tell the story well and truthfully and with a lot of context, it makes the whole process really run smoothly.
I guess a statement that I have gotten in trouble for making, but I don't shy away from, is I typically say recruiting and sales have nothing to do with each other. I don't believe, even on the external or internal side, I don't believe we should be thinking about the recruiting process itself as a part of a sales process. I think it's marketing. I think as you said, we're marketing a role, we're telling a story, we want to generate top of funnel interest so they can speak to the people that are actually doing the hiring, because I can't speak for them. When you think about recruiting at a little bit higher level, and we maybe start talking about some of the behaviors we see in recruiting right now, and there are things that we all know, the stigmas in recruiting, issues that we've seen come up, and we do see a lot of metrics that are very sales-y. I'm not going to say they're salesmen, but they're sales-ish, right? Is there a disconnect between how we'd like to do this, telling the story, versus how we sometimes view the recruiting job itself?
I think it depends on where you work, and it depends on who leads recruiting. And, I think it's a philosophical thing that each company has their own philosophy on what it means when it comes to hiring and recruiting, and what that experience is going to be. So I've seen it be very metrics driven, and, where it's just you're calling, you're doing outreach, and it's more of a numbers game. But I think that the places that do it the best, or the people that do it the best, I think they take a more holistic approach. And it's really, it's really about finding the right people for this company at the right time. And I don't see it as I don't know how to do it any other way than just being authentic and talking to people old school and figuring out who might be the best person for this role. And for the candidate side, is this something that you're going to want to do now? And is this in alignment with what you want to do next in your career? So, I think that I know that sounds very kind of hand wavy and like fairy tale like, but I think that the best recruiters can hustle, they know the right people, they can have a process, and they can embody that kind of mentality when they're going toward filling the role.
That makes sense. And every place is different, and some people have different, like as you said, baselines of what they're driving towards. And when you're talking about storytelling, we're talking about marketing. We're also talking about part of the experience in which a candidate is engaging with a company, right? I mean, that's part of what we're hoping to establish, is that they get a very good sense as to the job, a preview of what it's like to work there. When you're working with founders, and obviously, founders are very good at this part, especially when it comes to getting ready for a VC or talking to people what the company does. When a founder is looking to hire and they need to work on that storytelling part, are there things that you've seen typically that are some best practices that they could take away and understand?
Yeah. Sometimes I see a role and a job description. Let's just start with the job description. And it's just this sterile list of things, and it's missing all of the magic that includes what they're building, how this role will impact the company and the business, and what they're all working together on. And I think that the big thing is the big miss is they're not telling the story in the job descriptions of why it would be great to work here and why you should want to work here versus any other company. And it's extra hard because they don't have a brand yet. And so to be very clinical and just have bullets and have people just have to make these assumptions about what things might be there, if they go work there, it's just a real big miss if they're not baking that all into the story, the role.
And obviously, when I think of a founder, I think of someone that typically spends a lot of time talking about the company, right? They want people to understand, feel the passion, the energy. And I guess that gap that you just mentioned is interesting, because you would think they'd be a great group of people to kind of convey that. Is that maybe a medium thing in terms of when they are in front of somebody and they're talking, that's just part of what they're comfortable, but putting it into writing, putting it into words, do we kind of separate a little bit of that out and it becomes a little bit more challenging?
I think sometimes, and listen, some founders are great at writing job descriptions. I don't want to make a blanket statement that they're
No,
not.
that's fair. This is not to every founder, obviously.
Yeah, but also sometimes you may work for a founder at a company and you write the job description and you don't have the gift of that beautiful storytelling, that the founder does. So someone needs to bridge that gap. So I think that it's I see that a lot, and I think that the founders that are so great at their elevator pitch and talking about what they're doing, sometimes they get so excited about we're going to hire this person, and they get all caught up in what that person brings to the table, and so the job description becomes very much about what they need versus what this person's going to fold into and help build and all that magic. So I always say, kind of go back to, yes, you need to hire a product manager, and what will they do and how will that impact the business, and what are you looking for them to do, not just now, but in the next few months. And if they crush it, what will that look like? Really write that into the job so people can self-select and say, oh yeah, I could totally do that. If you leave those gaps open, it gives people an opportunity to not apply.
When it comes to the job description, telling that story, how much of the ending should we talk about? Meaning the expectations to succeed. And I say that because a lot of times when I talk to hiring managers, they're not always dialed in, especially if startups. They're not always dialed in on knowing what that acceptance criteria is. And I'm like, well, you guys do test-driven development. You guys write the test cases. You guys know that part of the process really well. You understand why it's important to know what you're willing to say yes to. Is part of that story, part of this process we're talking about, do we include that enough, especially from the founder's understanding, to convey the full life cycle story of this role?
I don't think that people usually do include enough. And one of the things that I like to do at the very beginning, before we even get to a job description, is I have this template. Like, who doesn't have a template? But basically what it does is it's just a neat framework for whoever is going to be hiring to say, this, here are our goals right now for the company, right? And this person is going to work on the brand and comms team, say. Their goals for the immediate future are this. This person, they'll contribute to this goal by doing A, B, C, and D, right? So you talk about the deliverables and the outcomes that you're expecting from this person. And then that kind of builds into, what kind of skills and experience and attributes does this person need to be successful here? So you go through this whole exercise in this kind of prep planning journey. And basically through that, I feel like you've got a lot of great material to write your job description and to have that move right into your, basically the interview plan, if you will. So that really helps with the storytelling, but also the meat and potatoes of what the person needs to do. And so it's very authentic. It's easy if you kind of start at that place.
I like the way you articulated that. And I guess when we're talking about storytelling and we're talking about, highlighting the positives, right? And sometimes I guess, what we tend to do, and I guess most marketers would first highlight the positives and rarely talk about, the pitfalls or the challenges. Is that fair? I mean, obviously this is different, right? We're not selling a widget, so we're not trying to convince people to click through and buy the widget. It is a job. Do we talk about, hey, these are some of the challenges of what we see this role being? These are some of the constraints. Do we go that far, or is that maybe going too far, before we've gotten into the interview process?
I don't know that I would go that far in a job description. What I would do is at the recruiter screen stage, if you have a recruiter, that's great. At an early stage company, you probably don't. You're the founder or the hiring manager and you're doing this. And so I think one way to kind of elegantly dip into points of friction, if you will, or things that we haven't yet figured out is to just say just that. Say, so here are all the things that we're doing and here's what's working really well. And, what I like to do is when I'm talking to a candidate, and this is something that anyone can do as a recruiter. So you don't have to be a recruiter to do a recruiter screen, right? But when you're a founder and you finally have someone on the phone or on Zoom that is interested and excited and wanting to talk to you about a role, it's really great to take a step back from trying to sell them on the role for a moment and hear about what really lights them up and what really sucks the life out of them on any given day. And if someone says, an example would be, on your best day, what's happening? I'm doing this. I'm meeting with the engineering team and the product team, and we're working on all these things. We're talking to customers. And then you go to, okay, great. What on your worst day, what's happening? I'm in a lot of meetings. There are not a lot of agendas. They're kind of pointless. Things don't happen. At that moment, if you register, that kind of happens here once in a while, it's really smart to say, you know what? Sometimes we have we're working on making sure that our meetings are better and more defined. And we'll have a beginning, middle, and end, and, expect a certain outcome after a meeting. So I think that the weaving in and out of the stuff that's not ideal at the company at the moment, and no company is ideal and has everything figured out anyway. So why not just bring that up and say, just say it, share those types of things organically during a conversation when that comes up, so you can actually give someone a real sense of what it might be like to work there. Putting it on the job description, it might be neat to add something at some point if it's like, hey, this is the first time we've hired someone in this role, so you're going to be able to build and fix, and then they know that that's their mission. But if it's something that's more about just something universally aspirational that you want to kind of get better at the company, I wouldn't throw that right into a job description.
I think you have to make sure that people have an understanding the context for some of those things. I think it's really hard. I guess as you were kind of speaking and I was thinking about, this part of the storytelling and the importance of conveying the essence of the job, why to work there. And I'm like, rarely do I see a job description. I do see some, but rarely do I see a job description focused on less bullets, more story. Less about context, less about the why. And what's funny is if you're recruiting engineers, typically their most pressing thing that they're looking to understand is, what problems am I working on? What are the projects that I'm dealing with? What are the challenges? Because they kind of view it as, you know what, if you want a software developer, plus or minus, we can all write similar languages. I might just be a little bit less efficient, but I'll pick it up. They don't view that as an issue. And I think it's interesting because, as I'm kind of listening to you speak, I'm like, you know what? It would be interesting to see what would happen if we said software engineer and asked the hiring person, the founder, to say, tell us why, and forget about bullets. We don't care one bullet. We don't care at all. We're going to actually just assume that the old way of writing a job description doesn't work. I wonder what the job description would look like and how much storytelling we could include in there versus all that space we waste.
I think it's so helpful. And I think when I was, so I started out in tech recruiting and I knew nothing about I didn't know how to recruit engineers. The kinds of engineers that I was supposed to recruit, I mean, it was like kernel engineers. I mean, this was like old school. Like, I really, around the operating system, I was just really green. I didn't know how to even talk to engineers, even if I got someone on the phone. And so something that I would do is I would talk to the engineering hiring managers and the teams that would be the interviewers. And I would say, what are you actually building? And like, why do you? So I would get the story, because the job description to me was just like alphabet soup, right? Letters, like, Java, this, that, or whatever. And it was like, tell me what you're actually doing and what are you building and what are you solving for? Because what I learned quickly after, and it really confirms what you just said, engineers want to be solving big problems and they want to know like what's in it for them to try and figure out, like, what could I go there and do? And so that juicy content comes from really just having a nice conversation about the day-to-day and what they're working on. And it's really less about the job description. It's almost two different things. Sometimes they don't even meet in the middle, the job description and the story, right? And that's when you're like, really, like, we've got to start over. We're not doing a good job here telling the story about what this is all about.
I think a lot of space is wasted. Instead of telling the story, we list, you need to have good communication skills. I'm like, who's going to volunteer when they apply? Say, you know what, I'm applying to this job and I just can't communicate. I've never seen that ever come up, that we need to qualify that we need good communicators for any job. So I do think that storytelling, the words to the founders, I think it'd be interesting to see if we got more of that context and how the hiring managers more of that context, kind of what you've been mentioning, getting that why behind the job. I think that'd be super. Yeah, I think that'd be interesting. So I was going to ask you, if somebody does want to reach out to you, pick your brain. We're not going to exhaust this topic. I think we're not the first to cover it, and I don't think we'll be the last, because I think it's an ever challenging debate of how do you tell stories and how does the job description and the hiring process reflect that story. But if somebody does want to pick your brain, continue talking to you about this, is there a good way of touching base with you?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn and message me, and I can, get back to them. This is something that I think a lot of recruiters geek out about, and like, how to make this better. And anyone who'd want to reach out, feel free through LinkedIn. Be happy to chat.
I love it. We'll make sure to include your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, so I can just click it and connect with you and do just that. Again, thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. That's it for the episode. We'll be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I love storytelling. I used to be in the data space. So when you deal with data, you learn how to tell stories with data. So, moving into talent and still realizing there's a story to tell, that's the challenge I really enjoy. I think the conversation was great. Share this episode with somebody else who might benefit and is trying to fight that good fight of, pulling more storytelling within the hiring process. That'd be great. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the podcast is going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.